Hi, are you wondering how to get client testimonials that actually grow your business? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. Hi, it's Joanne Funch, and I will give you 4 recommendation tips that will dramatically change your credibility. You know, getting great testimonials is a powerful way to help your clients confidently decide that you are the guide for them. And social proof absolutely factors into the buying decision. You know, the principle of social proof is actually psychological. So how many times have you watched or read a Google review before you checked out the new restaurant in town? Or another example is, how many of us have read an Amazon review before we placed our order? That's psychological. So you can see we live in a world where social proof absolutely matters. So think of it also as an important way for your clients to understand that you have credibility. And this is a way for you to build trust, which is the first step to gaining business. You know, the most powerful form of social proof is testimonials. And on LinkedIn, we call that recommendations. I see more LinkedIn profiles with outdated recommendations than I see profiles with current recommendations. And that's a super sad thing, because putting some effort into gaining positive recommendations can be the deciding factor for someone to do business with you. However, the problem with most testimonials, that focuses on a company or a person rather than the transformation they received. So here's an example. Someone might say, "Oh, Julie is really great to work with. I highly recommend her." Well, that really has no value. It's nice, but it has no value. So here's an example of where you would focus on a transformation, because the money, quite frankly, is in the transformation that we provide for people. So you might say, "I was stuck and about to give up. I decided to give it one more try and follow Julie's method. Within 1 week, I landed 5 clients and my entire business and life changed." So that's a more powerful form of a recommendation. So let me give you 4 tips on specifically how to gain really great recommendations. Number 1 is to be specific. Do not send the default recommendation request on LinkedIn that says, "Would you recommend me?" It's not helpful to the person you're sending it to. Now, I already gave you one example of how I might ask for a recommendation, but let me give you another one. I'm using myself as an example. I might say something like, "Thanks, Raphael, for working with me to update your LinkedIn profile. You mentioned to me that you wanted to show up in a more professional way prior to contacting me. And after we completed your profile, you mentioned to me that you are receiving more profile views and you're being contacted by more people. So if you would leave a recommendation that shares the journey before and after, I want to thank you in advance." Something like that, where I'm asking more specifically about the single service that I provided to him. You could say something if someone bought a training from you, for example, what kind of results from the training, and include a testimonial about how that training actually helped you gain a result. Okay, tip number 2 is to update your recommendations. You want to be relevant to the times, and that means you want recommendations within the same year it is now. You know, there's a more positive perception of people who have current recommendations than those who do not. And this also really applies if you're looking for a job, because recruiters and hiring managers absolutely value recommendations. Okay, tip number 3, I get asked all the time, when is the best time to ask for a recommendation? And my opinion is right after you've accomplished the work for someone. You're still top of mind with that person. And so I would suggest you just make that part of how you close out your client files. Okay, tip number 4, how many recommendations should you get? This is another question I get asked all the time. And my suggestion is to be, first of all, to be intentional about gaining a variety of recommendations specific to each service you offer. So you notice in the example I gave, it was very specific to writing his LinkedIn profile. Now, I have multiple services, and many of you have multiple services. So be specific. You know, the quantity is less relevant than the quality of those recommendations. Again, I like the idea actually of interviewing the client to get a really good recommendation ahead of time. So you really flush out the transformation they achieved from your service. Now, I think that means you need to ask some really good questions in that interview process. So I want to offer you a few tips on the types of questions that you should ask when you are getting some feedback from your client. So number 1 might be describe what was happening before you decided to join our program or buy our service. Number 2, what did you hope to achieve? Number 3, I think is a good question. What have you tried before and you hadn't gotten any results in? That's just good marketing information there. And tell us about the results you achieved. And how is your life different? Then you turn around and you send the recommendation request and you reframe it based on the conversation you just had. You'll get a much better quality recommendation that will actually serve you. Okay, so last thing I want to say is once you get those great recommendations, it's time to share them. And you can copy and paste your LinkedIn recommendation, and you could put it in a blog article. You could use it as a case study. You could put it on your website. I mean, that's always smart. If you were having a webinar and you had a sales page promoting that webinar, you would put those recommendations or testimonials, same thing, on that sales page. Those testimonials can actually help you pre-sell that client. You could put it in emails. I see that done all the time. Again, it's social proof and reinforcing perhaps an offer that you're making in an email. You could put it in advertising. You can put it on social media. And lastly, you could add it to your email signature. So I hope these tips were helpful, and you will go out and update your LinkedIn recommendations today.